Hi, everybody. I'm here today with a very special guest here on this Amigos interview. He's been here before, but he's got an exciting new project to talk about. I'd like to welcome Bill Winters, aka Amiga Bill. Hey, Bill.
What's going on, Boat? Great to see you. Thanks for having me back, man. I
Good.
love I love your show, man. It's an honor to be back on.
Well, I'm glad to see you as always, and man, I'm just blown away by the quality of your studio. Everything looks so cool. You got the mixing board there and the lighting. You're rocking the setup, Bill. I gotta say.
Thanks. Yeah, I've been doing the live streams on Twitch, and I try and sex it up a little bit. You don't want to see the other corner of the room, believe me. But I made this corner. The great thing about cameras and cinematography is the camera only sees what you point it at. So
That's right.
that's the most important thing.
That's right. So you've got a new documentary that you are on the team of. I don't want to say you're producing it because I'm sure there's somebody else that actually has the title of producer. It's called Arcade Dreams. So you remember this team, and everybody knows you as the Amiga guy. I would say you're if not the most visible, one of the most visible stars in the Amiga galaxy these days. But we don't know very much about your history with arcades and arcade machines. So what was it like growing up? Did you visit a lot of arcades?
Oh yeah, I mean, I grew up in the arcade, and that was like one of the reasons why I loved Amiga so much because the Amiga has some like amazing arcade ports. Like it was almost arcade perfect. Like I think Marble Madness is a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Arkanoid is a great one. I grew up playing those games in the arcade, and that's one of the things that drew me to the Amiga. My dad, he used to take me to the arcade all the time. We had a really great place called Nathan's. It was like a hamburger and hot dog place. It's originated in Brooklyn, New York, but now they have them all over the place. And the Nathan's up where we live in Yonkers had this massive arcade. It was huge, and it was like the place to go for kids, on the weekend. And my dad used to take me down there. I used to love like Asteroids and the old school stuff like Asteroids and Space Invaders. And then as I got a little bit older, the arcades were around a lot where I live. I live in the suburbs of New York City, and we had some really great arcades here. And then there was another one I used to go to that was attached to a bowling alley. So when I was in high school, me and my buddy Chris, we'd go to the bowling alley every Friday night, and we'd play like Street Fighter 2 there. Like Street Fighter 2 just come out, and Mortal Kombat. So we played tons of arcade games at the Mount Kisco Bowl. And just we've had quite a few arcades around. So like Friday nights when I was a kid was Nathan's. Then I kind of started going to Mount Kisco Bowl in high school, and then on Saturdays when I was young, my dad and his buddy used to take me to and his kids to another arcade that was in another town. So we had like 4 or 5 arcades that my dad used to take me to frequently. And then a lot of times too, there were like restaurants that had arcades, small arcades in them. So there was one called the Ground Round. It was like this awesome like hamburger restaurant, and they had an arcade in the front area, and I used to play Ghosts and Goblins there. And it was so cool. I used to love it. They had a great Ghosts and Goblins machine. And there was just, the pizza place where I used to go to had a great arcade machine. So there were specific arcades, and there were restaurants that had arcades attached to them that I've been going to, since my whole life.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So it's clear that you're just as passionate about the arcade scene as you are the Amiga scene, which is really cool. So tell me about this Arcade Dreams project. What was the genesis of this thing?
It's funny, the whole genesis is that I met Zach Weddington, who's also another Amiga fanatic, working on a film called Viva Amiga, which is playing behind me right now.
Yeah.
And so after Zach made Viva Amiga, he wanted to do another project about Sega because he's a big Sega fan. He like Outrun is his favorite game of all time. So he started doing a lot of research about Sega, but then it's just like one thing led to another. And he's just like, what? Like I've been exposed to all these amazing arcade collectors in my experience researching the Sega documentary. I think I want to do something all about arcades, not just Sega, because there's such a so many stories that haven't been told yet. And one of the cool things about this documentary series originally is going to be a single film, but because Zach has uncovered so much information, he's going to make it a series. We found out stuff about like these old arcade machines. It's so cool because when we grew up in arcades playing video games, Space Invaders, Pac-Man, but arcades have been around a lot longer than that. There's pinball, of course, going back to the one generation, and before pinball, there were even arcade machines that are just all mechanical, pre-pinball arcade machines that are absolutely stunning. They're masterpieces of engineering. They're beautiful pieces of art. It's almost like you're playing a game, with a fine Swiss watch.
Yeah.
They're absolutely amazing.
The mechanical aspect of pinball, I'm talking about, solid state electromechanical pinball from the 70s. There's something about knowing that there's everything going on underneath the table surface is just mind-bogglingly complex. That really appeals to me.
It's amazing. I've seen people in the shooting for the documentary like open up pinball machines and look underneath, and it just looks like a bunch of wires thrown in there to me. I can't make heads or tails of it. And believe it or not, there's other machines that we've shot that aren't even electronic. They're fully mechanical machines.
Mm.
It's just it's stunning pieces of engineering. Not only the games are fun, but just the way they're created is amazing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, obviously you are teamed up with Zach. Who would you say, is the murderer's row of this project? Who are you most excited to include?
Oh wow! I mean, the thing is, I don't know if not one person in particular, but like I said, the learning about these mechanical arcade machines has been a great experience for me because I know about Pac-Man, I know about Space Invaders, I grew up with it, but I knew nothing about the mechanical machines. But I guess on Murder's Row, there are a few key interviews that Zach is landing right now. But I really love like the Galloping Ghost arcade because it's one of the premier arcades here in Chicago. So
Oh
going
yeah.
there was just an amazing experience. And Doc, the guy who owns it, is an arcade fanatic and a legend in the arcade scene. So that one was pretty cool. And Zach has got he's got a few others lined up that maybe aren't quite signed on the line yet, but they'll be really good. I know they're gonna do it.
Awesome, awesome. So, tell me a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of this project, this Arcade Dream. So this is, I've looked at the Kickstarter page, and so I'm going to ask you some things, and I think that I know what's going on, but I want to be sure. So this is going to be a multi-part documentary series, right? Almost like a series of TV episodes.
Exactly. It's going to be a multi-part series. We've already shot pretty much all of episode 1, and we've shot a good part of episode 2. And depending on, how much funding it gets, that will kind of determine the number of episodes that there are. The more funding that Zach gets, the more he can afford to produce more episodes. But the idea is that it's going to span like 100 years of arcade history. So it's going to start with these early mechanical machines, go to pinball, then go to arcades, like arcades from the 80s, Pac-Man, Space Invaders, and then even take a look at some of the future of arcades, because there's still arcades around, believe it or not, and they'll take a look at virtual reality and in the arcades like we have them now, like Dave and Buster's
Okay.
style.
So it's going to be a chronological thing, right? Episode 1 is going to be the furthest back, and then it'll just work its way forward. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, I'd say for episode 1, this is fertile ground for you guys. I've never seen a documentary based on these old, electromagnetic, it's a hard word for me to say, Bill, games, and especially like you said, these games that don't even work with electricity, that are just entirely mechanical. It's really exciting to see a documentary focus in on that stuff. But once you kind of push the needle forward into the 70s and the 80s, there are quite a few documentaries that cover those particular machines. Everybody knows the story of Space Invaders and Pac-Man and stuff like that. So for the person that's sort of on the fence about backing the project with that in mind, what makes your approach unique?
Well, there's just the fact that there's more to it than just the arcade machines that we grew up with.
Sure.
So I think that's, if you want to learn about pinball, I always thought pinball was just, don't let the ball get past your flipper.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand how to play pinball. So of course there'll be the mechanical machines, the pinball machines, and then when it comes to the arcade machines from the 70s and 80s, it's more about the experience of being in an arcade and the people surrounding it. So we talk to collectors, we talk to people like, what was it like owning an arcade, in the 70s and 80s. They have stories about how they'd have to like go around to all the arcades that they owned and all their coin operated places and pick up the quarters, and they would have to like hire security guards to come with them because they would be carrying so much money in quarters that they would there's a high probability that they would be robbed. And so stories like that you don't normally used to hearing when you hear stories of video games.
Yeah. So you're looking at it less from a historical perspective. I'm sure there will be some history in there, but it's really just coming from a personal perspective of, what was it like to be an owner? What was it like to be part of the scene?
Yeah, we talked to a bunch of owners, and we went out to Vegas, and we experienced like one of the largest sales of arcade machines. Someone's collection. It was the largest collection like ever sold at one time.
Wow.
Of arcade machines. So it's a lot of like unique stories that you've never heard, unique perspectives, and of course there will be history in it too. Like there'll be the history of you'll see the Pac-Man and Space Invaders, and you'll get a background on them. But we're trying to focus on more unique stories, and also just like the vibe of the arcade, because that's what I loved about the arcade. Like playing the games was great, but just being in the arcade and that vibe and the sounds of the arcade and the colors and the light and the experience of like being there with your friends, we're trying to like kind of bring that back and help people help transport people back to that time and back to that place when they were actually in the arcade hanging out.
Yeah, man, that sounds pretty rad. I like that a lot. So, I want to ask you some specific questions about challenges in filming arcade machines. Obviously, Emmy award-winning cinematographer, a little bit about, how to film, various, types of things. But it seems like arcade machines pose a unique challenge because you've got to adjust things just right so you can see not only the screen but also the machine itself and have everything be lit properly. So for those listeners and watchers that are interested in filming in cinematography, what do you call cinematography when it's not quite so highfalutin? Is there another word for it when you just when you're interested in making videography, I guess?
Videography,
yeah. So for people that are into videography and maybe they have their own collection that they'd like to film, can you give us some pointers in setting up a scene correctly?
Sure. I mean, it's really challenging. Some of the hard parts about shooting the arcades are just their physical size, and like when I go into the arcade, I don't necessarily have all the control that I want to have over it. And the machines are like right next to each other. So there's just the physicality of that. Like, do you pull the machine out and try and photograph or shoot it by itself, or do you leave it in its place with all the other arcade machines? So there's that. But the technical side of it that you're alluding to are things like, the scan rate of the monitor syncing with the shutter of the camera. So if you just take like a normal video camera and you aim it at a CRT, chances are you're going to get a roll on the screen, and you're not going to be able, it's not going to be a solid image. Like, actually, this is a CRT here and it's perfectly solid. And the reason why it's solid is because I can adjust the shutter on my camera to sync with the scanning of the CRT monitor.
Yeah.
So that's like step number one, is just trying to get rid of either the flicker or the roll on the monitor. And you do that by adjusting the shutter on your camera and getting it in sync with that. Of course, the problem is not all arcade machines have the same sync rate. So
Exactly.
if you're in the arcade, like sometimes you can't avoid it. Some of them are going to roll, some aren't.
Yeah. So I mean, are you ever going back through and compositing, screens together just to avoid that?
Yeah, you can do that. You can shoot them separately and then composite it in. We're absolutely going to do that for sure. That's going to be part of it. The other thing that's really tricky is the light intensity. Some of these machines have built-in lighting that's really bright, and then the arcade itself is really dark. So you get like a hot spot behind the banner,
right?
And then but everything else is dark. So what you have to do is kind of either take it apart, or you take something called neutral density gel, and you put the neutral density gel over the part that's really bright, and that will make it darker for the camera. So you get all the light into the right dynamic range of the camera, so nothing is too overexposed.
That's something that I've run into problems with shooting arcade marquees, is that you can see where the light is behind the marquee, not with your eye. It looks great, but with the camera. And so is that a case where you would use that gel, or would you use something else? Okay.
No, I would use that gel for sure. Absolutely. The other thing that comes into play is like getting your exposure right. Something that helps is if you light the machine. The whole idea is that you want to have all the camera's got a dynamic range, which means it's the blackest black to the whitest white, and it's much more limited than our eye can see. So if you walk into an arcade where the ambience is extremely dark and then you have those hot spots, your eye can adjust for it, but the camera can't. So the idea is you need to adjust for that artificially with lights. So if you can't make the hot spot darker, you make the environment brighter. So it brings everything into balance. Or usually it's a combination of both. It's taking the brightest parts of the arcade machine, making it darker, and then taking the environment, the ambient light, and making it brighter. But the trick is you don't want to make it too bright, because you don't want to kill the vibe either.
Right. You don't want it to look like you walk into a new mall arcade where everything's brightly lit and lame. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So even here, like I took the brightness on that monitor and I turned it way down. It is literally all the way down. That's an Amiga 2002 monitor. And brightness is all the way down, and the contrast is pretty low. Those terms are misleading if you're going to shoot a monitor like this. Brightness and contrast, it's not really brightness and contrast that you would think of it in your head. Brightness is the black level and contrast is the white level. So the more you turn down the brightness, the white level is going to, like the bright stuff, is going to stay the same, and the blacks are going to get either darker or more gray. And then if you use the contrast knob, it'll take the whites and either make them a little bit darker or a little bit whiter. So it's not true contrast. True contrast, if if you're really adding like contrast to an image, it makes the blacks blacker and the whites whiter. But in the case of a monitor like this, the contrast is just the whites and the brightness is the blacks.
Now, did you have access to, when you were filming in these arcades, did you have access to the pots in the back of the monitor so you could make minor adjustments, or were you pretty much, did you have to deal with what was there?
Well, we haven't done too much of the extreme beauty stuff yet. So I usually do it by increasing the ambient light and putting the lights in the right place. We haven't really taken machines. We've taken some of the mechanical machines apart. We haven't taken many of the arcade video games apart yet. We haven't gotten there yet. We're still we've shot some for sure, but we haven't really dug into shooting the more modern arcades. You know, I think that's going to be something that happens after the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But it'll be a combination of both, but I have the most control over lighting the environment. So that would be the key, is to bring up the environment. And one of the things that makes lighting the environment much easier these days is the fact that we now, in the film business, like most of the lighting is LED and a lot of the LEDs are RGB. So in order to keep that, that neon kind of vibe, we can easily dial in any color we want with the RGB LED lights, which is so nice. Like actually even the light behind me right now is a red, RGB. It's not RGB, it's just a red light, but it's a red LED. And but a lot of them you can, you have full RGB control over. You can make it any color you want.
Yeah. Does that include the temperature and everything?
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Back in the old days, we'd have to put a physical gel in front of the light to change the color.
Right.
When you do that, like there's a few things involved. Like first of all, it's going to cut the amount of light that comes out like dramatically. So if you have a light that's usually like pretty bright and then you put like a red gel on it or blue gel, it's going to make it way dimmer. The other problem with it is that you're limited to like that gel.
Yeah.
when you have an RGB LED, you can make it like any color you want and any shade of that color that you want. So the tools that we have at our disposal today are awesome. And because they're LED lights, you can run them off batteries, so you don't have to run cables everywhere. Like if I had to, like we did this one shot where we were like lighting the arcade, and like if I had to run wires to the lights, it would have been difficult because the wires would have been in the shot. There was nowhere to hide them. But because we have lights that can run off battery power and have magnets on them, we can just place them anywhere we want. It's amazing.
Can you run a shoot that's completely battery powered that you don't have to run any? Is the technology there for that now?
Absolutely. Yeah, you can do all battery. I wouldn't always recommend it. It's always good to have power when you can.
Yeah.
But the batteries come into play for sure. And it also depends. Like the bigger lights are still power only. Well, that's not true. The bigger lights use bigger batteries. But yeah, you can have something that's all battery, but it's maybe not something you'd want to do all day. But if you're going to light a scene for an hour, no problem.
Well, it allows you, I'm sure, to just be so much more dynamic with the way that you set up everything.
You can kind of put a light wherever you want it, without having to worry about running cables. And it's also speed is a big factor too. It takes time to run all those cables. And if you can just pop a battery powered light where you need it, it's quicker and you get a lot more shots in your day.
Can you tell me a story about when you were filming one of these old mechanical games, when you took it apart and were filming it? Was there anything that really struck you about the ingenious design?
One of the things that got me the most is we were shooting in the basement of this collector. His name is Bruce the Most, really, really great guy. And he's got this amazing pinball collection and mechanical arcade collection. And the thing that just amazed me the most is when you open it up, to me, it's like, I don't understand anything that's going on. And when they start to explain it to me, it starts to make sense, but I'm not advanced enough to really understand. It's almost like looking at code of a video game. I kind of get the general idea of what's going on, but I don't really understand the nitty-gritty. Like if you show me that line of code, I don't know what that does.
Sure.
It's like if you show me this lever where the ball drops in, I get that, but then I don't understand what happens after
that. Yeah.
And so I'm trying to learn that, but just every time someone opens one of those machines up, I'm just blown away. And when I see someone, like we were shooting at MagFest, the Music and Games Festival in Washington, D.C., they have an amazing arcade there. And the machines are always breaking down. These are old machines. And when one of the repair people goes over and like opens up the pinball machine and is there, with all of this testing equipment and soldering irons, I'm just like, I don't, it just blows my mind. I don't know how they're able to fix it, but they do.
I think one of the cool things about the Electromechanical Games are even if you don't like the game, in quotes, you can still appreciate it as a work of functional art. I mean, back then, they were all hand painted. There was so much work by craftsmen that went into crafting the cabinetry that surrounds it all. And that's not something that you get these days with games that roll off a factory line. So artistic wise, is there anything that really impressed you in particular? What machine impressed you? The way that all of these, excuse me, the way that it just sort of came together.
Man, there are a lot of them. The ones that really stand out in my mind are the pinball machines. There's just some the artwork on the pinballs are just incredible. Like I'm thinking right now because it's Halloween time. I'm thinking of the Elvira pinball machine.
Uh huh.
Like the artwork on that is stunning. I'm loving I love the Iron Maiden pinball machine. It's so good. It's the artwork on that cabinet is just amazing. I really love the artwork on the pinball machines a lot. Those are the ones that really stand out to me. They're just the colors are amazing, and it just sucks you right in.
Yeah, I agree with you. I have a triple machine called Triple Action. I'm looking at it right now across the room. In fact, I will just spin the camera around and show you right over there.
Nice.
This is a Williams machine from 1974. And I love the stenciled artwork on the sides. It's just there's just something about having real paint and not just a sticker application, on there. And it's the same thing with the playfield. The playfield is all painted with real paint. It wasn't just a sticker that went on. And unfortunately, that means that it wears like real paint does, and then it costs
Right.
Yeah.
But that's interesting too, because we're talking about before, like other interesting stories, and a lot of these collectors love the patina of the machine.
Yeah.
Like they just love the fact that you can see that's been used and it's been worn. It's not pristine, and every machine has got a story. We shot this one machine with a gentleman named John Torrance, and he had what they called the ghost machine. Like no one believed that this machine actually exists in the collecting world. They're like, no, this machine doesn't exist. But sure enough, John Torrance had one, and we went there and shot this ghost machine. And it's like one of the first times this machine has ever been shown.
That's
on
super
video.
exciting.
Yeah. and he's all about the patina, and he's just like, it's like this, like, you can see like where the people used to put their hands, and the soldiers when they were playing it, when they were out on duty in World War II, and this is where they were standing here at this machine, and you can see exactly where their hands used to rest, and it's a lot of history in each machine.
Another thing that's different, I've Aaron owns a bunch of pinball machines. I just have the one, but you can really tell the difference in the materials that were used. The older the machine, the heavier it is, and the more likely it is to survive an atomic blast.
The old adage, make them like they used to, is very true.
Yeah. Whenever I swing open the coin door in my machine, I mean, the coin door itself probably weighs 10 pounds. It's amazing. Wow. Can you talk us through the Kickstarter proper for people that are interested in backing you? You don't have to go through every single tier, but just kind of give us a rundown of what they can expect.
Yeah, there's all different, tiers of backing the Kickstarter. There's everything from just like a small donation to getting a digital download of the actual series. And then, as you contribute more money, you get more perks. You can get a Blu-ray of the series at some point. You can, and if you want, like one of the really cool perks, if you're fortunate enough to have a great collection and you're fortunate enough to have the means to do it, there's a certain level that you pledge, like we'll even come and shoot your collection for you and put it in the series.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
I love
that's
that.
a cool. Yeah, because we're just some of the people who are interested in this series are obviously hardcore collectors, and if you're a hardcore collector, like why not show off your collection?
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back to the technical side of things, because I'm sure that there will be people that want to know what equipment are you using as far as cameras and lenses to do the majority of the shooting.
The majority of the shooting so far has been done with my own personal camera. It's a Canon C300 Mark II. It's a Super 35 sensor, and it shoots in 4K, so the series will be in 4K. And it's a really nice camera. It's great for documentary work. I used it for the first time on the show Commutes and Cars Getting Coffee with Jerry Seinfeld. It's a workhorse in the industry, and it creates a beautiful image. It's small enough where this is a personal documentary. Like this doesn't have a Hollywood budget.
Right,
It's basically, this is like me and Zach and one or two other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't come in with a big camera that I would normally shoot with because we don't have the support system. So this Canon C300 allows me to do everything essentially. I can just operate the camera all on my own, and it's small enough where we can move it around quickly. We can get a lot of shots. Zach is also shooting with his camera. He's got a small Blackmagic camera, so he picks up shots when I'm off shooting something. He goes out and shoots some more B-roll as well. Or if there's a shoot that I can't go on, Zach will take his Blackmagic out and shoot it. But hopefully, if the Kickstarter goes through, I'll be able to be on all the shoots. That's the goal.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say, you're asking 100 grand for the Kickstarter, and that's who's to say if that's a large amount of money or not. It is what it is. But what is going to happen when you meet that goal? What is this going to allow you to do?
Yeah, well, then, I mean, it's going to allow us, first of all, to travel. 100 grand, it sounds like a lot, sure. And it is. I mean, there's nothing to sneeze at. But, like when it comes to filmmaking terms,
It's a drop
100
in the
grand,
bucket. Yeah.
100 grand is a no budget.
Right, right.
Because if you think about it, like, for example, if you're talking about the camera equipment that we're using to shoot it, if you were to go out and rent the equipment that I'm bringing between the camera and the lights, it would cost you at least $3,000 per day just to rent the equipment that I'm
Boy.
bringing. And then you have to think about the flights, right? Zach and I both live on the East Coast. I live in New York and he's in Philly. And if we go out to Chicago to shoot, we've got to fly there. We've got to fly there. We've got to stay in hotels. We got to eat.
Yeah.
We need to rent cars. We need to pay for, putting either we're going to put the equipment on the plane, or in some cases, like with the lighting, we usually rent it locally. So even though I own a lot of lighting, when we travel, I can't necessarily bring it with me. So we have to rent it from a film, a rental house, wherever we're going.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just like the expenses are just really out of pocket expensive are a lot. And then of course, like all the post production that Zach is going to do on it when he edits that's like it's like a year of work sitting there editing.
Oh yeah,
it's
a job just like everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Zach's also hiring other people too. He's hiring people to do the graphics, hiring people to help promote it. He's hiring 3D artists to do 3D renderings. Because Zach's films have a lot of production value in them, and Zach came up as a visual effects artist essentially. Post production, editing, and visual effects. So all of his films, including like Viva Amiga, they have like great art in them. They have great 3D modeling and rendering. He did some awesome stuff. Paul Kitching did like amazing 3D work in Viva Amiga of like all awesome stuff with Amigas, 3D modeled Amigas, and this will have similar artwork, but of course with arcade machines.
Yeah. I thought that one of the best things about, Viva Amiga was great all the way around, but I really felt like they went the extra mile in terms of getting Paul to do those renderings. There were a lot of things that you just don't see in your normal sort of YouTube quality documentary that really put it above and beyond, and I had no problem, paying for it. If you were going to give some advice, say that there is an aspiring filmmaker that wants to tackle a project, maybe not quite so expansive as the one in Arcade Dreams, but maybe somebody that wants to document the history of their own local arcade. If you were going to give them some advice on, equipment that they might need to get started to produce something that is of quality, they want to just get beyond filming with their smartphone or whatever, could you give me just a quick list of things that they might want to consider getting?
Sure. It's so funny. I'll preface it by this. The most important thing, the two most important things are, first of all, it's the story, right? You have to shoot something that people are going to be interested in. That's the most important. And it doesn't matter if you shoot on your phone. Like, don't be discouraged because you only have a phone. The phones today are amazing. Like, just tell your story, because if you have an interesting story to tell, people are going to watch it.
Yeah.
But getting to like the more technical stuff, there's so many amazing cameras now that are, relatively inexpensive. I'm a big fan of the DSLR cameras. Like, I love the Sony A7S series. They're incredible. The Sony A7R series is great too. They have higher resolution for still photography. The Blackmagic cameras are great. So just, get a nice camera, something like that. Something, that's like a couple $1,000s. And the sound is extremely important. Like, don't skimp on the sound. Because you can have a great camera, but if your sound is poor, it's just you can shoot with a $100,000 camera, but if your sound is terrible, it's gonna seem cheap.
Yeah.
So like the sound has got to be great. And I always say, like, upgrade, your weakest link. So let's say you've got a nice camera. Let's say you've already got a Blackmagic and you want to like upgrade to a Canon C300 or Sony FS9. That sounds great, but if your microphones are bad, upgrade the microphones first. So like always upgrade your weakest link. And of course, the lighting is also really, really important. You need to, if you go into a space, more often than not, you're going to have to light it. And lighting isn't just about like getting an exposure so you can see it. Lighting is also extremely creative, and you can create the mood that you want to create and tell the story that you want to tell through the lighting. And you don't necessarily need expensive lights. Lights are like film lights are really, really expensive. It's not always about the most expensive light. It's about using it's about knowing where to put the light. That's the most important thing. Like your light placement is the most important thing. It doesn't matter if it's a light bulb from Home Depot or it's an $8,000 ARRI light.
Right.
It doesn't matter. You have to put it in the right place.
Now, this is something that I've struggled with over the years. As you can see here in the studio where I'm filming, the lighting is not awesome. On Amazon, there's all these sort of cheap lighting kits. They have the tents, and then you put the thing over the thing. Is that really what you want to get? Something that's about $50, and you have like all these different tripod lights, or is there another solution that I just don't know about?
Yeah, I tell you, some of those cheap solutions on Amazon aren't that bad.
Okay.
Okay. The thing that makes them cheap is the build quality.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are taking them and putting them on an airplane, they might not last a couple. they might only last a couple of shoots. They're really cheap and not made well. The other thing that is situation with those is some of the bulbs aren't the best color. So like if you're using an LED light, that it might be kind of a little bit on the green side, or they might not match. That's a really important thing. Like you want everything to match lighting wise. So like if you have lights that theoretically should match and they don't, it's going to look bad. So it's better, even if the light looks wrong, if they're all wrong, if they're all equally wrong, then you can correct for it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
but if you have one light, if one light's like too orange, or light's too blue, and then you get into trouble, because then you can't correct them individually in post-production.
Now, I want to go back to something that you said earlier about DSLRs, and maybe I'm just woefully out of date, but I always heard growing up that you shouldn't try and shoot long form with DSLRs because you can burn up the sensor. There was some sort of warning, and people were saying, don't do it. Have things changed now, and that's no longer an issue?
Yeah, they changed a lot. I mean, that's also, those are really DSLRs, where there's actually a mirror in front of the sensor, and the mirror goes up. And those cameras were not designed for video. The way it happened is they had what's called live preview, and the live preview was so you could see in real time what your still was going to be. But it turns out that people started using that live preview to record video because the DSLRs had large sensors, they had full frame sensors, and it had the cinematic look.
Right.
And there's also a whole bunch of other issues like debayering and all that stuff. But people started using them for video when they weren't designed for video. But now, like a camera like the Sony A7S is pretty much designed for video. Like they have the A7. That's why they even have two different kinds. They have the A7R. R means resolution. It will do video and stills. But like the Sony A7S III it's really designed, and in some ways it's designed for video. It does video really well, and there's absolutely no problem using it. One of the reasons why you wouldn't necessarily want to use it for professional use is because when you're on a real movie set, there's a lot of other things besides just shooting with the camera. You need to get the image to a video village. You need to have a
wait a minute. Define video village. What is that?
Okay, so when you're on a real shoot, right? Other people need to see what you're shooting besides the cameraman or camera person. The producer is going to need to see it. The director is going to need to see it. The advertising agency is going to need to see it if you're on a commercial production. So basically, whatever is being shot needs to be broadcast to a location where the other people can see it.
So it's like a closed circuit type thing?
Yeah, essentially. It's essentially what it is. It's hooking a monitor up to the camera.
Okay.
Yeah, so each camera will have a monitor, and it's important for the makeup artist is going to look at it because the actors, the talent's going to have.
So as you're there on the set and as you're filming, this whole group of other people are watching you off site in real time.
Yeah, well, not sometimes. Well, now with COVID, they're off site, but before that, I mean, they would be in the same room.
Okay.
And, but like off to the side. Yeah, but that's a big part of it, and being able to tap into that video village is essential. And then like let's say you do the video village, a lot of times it's transmitted wirelessly. They have wireless so it's just all like professional standards. Being able to take a Teradek wireless transmitter and plug it into the camera. You can't necessarily do that with the small DSLRs or mirrorless. I mean, you can now, but you couldn't back then. Things are evolving a little bit, and there's just all like these professional features that are required, on a real set that you don't really have to worry about if it's just you going out and shooting with a DSLR or mirrorless camera. You don't have to worry about video village because you're not going to have one, and so it's no problem. Yeah, and the other things too, like more robust media to record the footage onto. And then like standards, like I said, you're gonna have a camera system that's gonna pull focus for you on a real shoot, and you need the right rod so they can attach the Preston wireless follow focus control, stuff like that. It's all industry standard equipment, so you can mix and match.
Yeah, yeah.
Better lenses, you can put better lenses on the more professional cameras too.
Do you think we're ever going to see a day, or do you think it's going to end up being like how Canon, for years and years they artificially limited their photo cameras
Mhm.
so they wouldn't cannibalize sales of their video cameras? Do you think that that's happening still to a certain extent with the deliberate, not putting in features?
Yes and no. I think it's become a lot different now. I think they're focused. It's almost like instead of having like a small, medium, and high, it's almost like there's like smaller prosumer stuff and there's the high end stuff. There's like a big gap between them. So you have, like I was talking about, the Blackmagic cameras, the Sony A7 series, even like the Canons. It's not really. They're not really cannibalizing each other, in my opinion. Because there's such a big gap between that and like an Arriflex or a Red Monstro. I feel like they're not worried about cannibalizing anymore, because the people who are going to want the Arri are going to get the Arri. You know what I mean? The people who can't afford it are going to try and get as the best that they can afford, and it's not in their best interest to cannibalize a camera anymore.
Okay,
it's like make the best camera you can at that price point.
And I guess the good news for the consumer is that, obviously if you're buying one of these high-end cameras, you are doing this for a living. And, everything below that, all the prosumer stuff, you can end up with a very, very good result. And even just a few years ago, that might not have been the case.
You can end up with amazing results. There's a new Sony camera that came out called the FX9. It just came out a few months. Well, maybe my time is all messed up right now. Right before COVID essentially came out, and it's so good. I think you can get the whole package with the lens for like $13,000, which sounds expensive, and it is. But that can compete with a camera that's $100,000. Like the gap is getting closed, and a lot of times people will use their A camera, the Sony Venice, which is their top of the line camera, and then they'll have the FX9 as a second camera. So they have two angles, but they match really well. And some people are like, well, do I really even need to shoot with the Venice? Can I just shoot with the FX9? So from that standpoint, it's kind of cannibalizing it a little bit, but the high end market is still going to go with the Venice, because there's features that it has that the FX9 just can't do.
Yeah, I'm going to completely leave the reservation now and just keep talking about this. So
Cool.
When you are on the set, do you get to choose, or does the studio choose what equipment you use as the cinematographer?
The thing about the film business is every single job is different. So it's never the same every time. Generally speaking, I'm the director of photography. I'm the one that chooses the camera and the lenses we're going to shoot with. And I'll collaborate with the director on that. We'll have a discussion and we'll talk about the look that's trying to be achieved. And I'll advise them on, the best equipment to use for the job. But, every now and then there's a producer that's really excited about a brand new camera, and it's there at the end of the day, it's their project. And if they want to use the hot new camera, but you're going to use the hot new camera, because it's up to them. So sometimes I don't have the choice. Like if the producer is like really into, if they want to shoot with the new red Komodo that's coming out and they're hot to trot for it, I'm like, all right, I'll shoot with the red Komodo, no problem.
But it's not like product placement like in the NFL, where it's like you have to use Bose headsets. It's not like Warner Brothers has a contract with Red that says you have to use our cameras.
It's not like that, but there's always there's always a political factor involved, I would say. For example, with Netflix, right? When David Fincher, when he made, oh my God, my Kevin Spacey thing, I'm totally.
Oh, House of Cards?
When he made House of Cards, David Fincher changed the game, and he was a huge proponent of the red camera. Like he loved the resolution, he loved the way it looked. And he basically told Netflix, he's like, look, 4K is the future. You never want to shoot anything that's not natively 4K. And he used the red and they got amazing results with it. So they kind of leaned in that direction. They did say things like, if your camera doesn't shoot native 4K, you can't use it on a Netflix show. So they even have a list of like Netflix approved cameras. So if you're going to shoot a show for Netflix, it has to be on that list of Netflix approved cameras.
I wonder if Netflix is getting any kickbacks from,
No, I don't think so. No, I think it's just, they just want, they have very high quality content, and they want to make sure that they want to standardize it as much as they can. They just don't want any weak links. They want their content to be as good as possible.
It seems to me that if you can slap Netflix approved camera on the box, you're probably going to be selling a couple more units. It is
a big deal, because one of the most popular cameras in the industry, the Arri Alexa, is not a Netflix approved camera, because natively its sensor is 3.2K, not 4K sensor natively. But Arri's approach is that we don't necessarily think resolution is as important as the quality of the pixels. Like our pixels are larger and have better quality, and that's more important than having more of a lesser quality pixel. I mean, you can't argue with the ARRI Alexa. It's an amazing camera. Two different philosophies, you know. Now all the new ARRI cameras are going more resolution because they need to be Netflix approved. Netflix is a big player in the game now. They're amazing. They're not just a DVD rental place anymore.
Right.
They're a major motion picture studio. So
Yeah.
you don't want to you don't want to exclude yourself from that, because they're producing amazing content and amazing quality content. So you don't want to eliminate yourself from that. One time I did bring a Red to Japan once, and they weren't too happy about bringing the American camera coming in on Sony and Panasonic.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's very regional thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So so there's something like that, you know. When I shoot in Europe, they're very proud of their ARRI cameras, and they should be, because they're some of the best in the business. So you feel that, you know. But there's no there's no like studio that like only shoots Red that I know of.
Okay, that makes sense. Is it like you know, if somebody, an aspiring filmmaker, is looking at buying a secondhand camera, is it sort of like, I only know about you know, regular cameras and nothing about this. So, but I know that, like, for example, if you buy like an old 1D, and the sensor size is going to sort of compensate for the lack of megapixels. Is it the same sort of thing with video cameras? Can you buy an older full HD camera that will give you better quality than a newer 4K camera because it's got a bigger sensor, or does it not work that way?
It does to a certain extent. It's not just the size of the sensor that counts, because Super 35 it's not a full frame sensor, but it's a great size. It's an industry standard. It's more about the overall, you know, quality of the camera and the lens that you're putting in front of it. So, for example, I could shoot with an ARRI Alexa, a camera that it won the Oscar for, you know, the cinematographer who won the Oscar every year for the past 10 years. I think it's 10 years in a row, the ARRI Alexa won the Oscar for best cinematography. That's a 3.2K sensor. Technically, the iPhone is a 4K, but but when you see the final results, obviously the Alexa looks far superior. And there's a lot of factors for that. It's the lensing, it's the quality of the sensor itself, it's the way that the software interprets the information that the sensor is getting. It's the compression. People don't understand compression. Compression's a really, really big thing.
Just all the software side of the, you know, the internal processing.
Yeah, the more compressed your image is, the worse it's going to look, and the less you can do with it in the color grade. So, you know, like a lot of even like the GoPros and stuff, like the codecs that they use, they're so compressed. That's part of the reason for the lower quality.
And that's why they're cheaper too, right?
Yeah,
like you think about, it's a 4K camera and it's only X amount of money.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into it. You know, like resolution is important. Like you don't want to shoot with a VHS camera unless you're me and you stream and you're going for that look. But you know, there's just a lot of factors. There's the sensor, there's the dynamic range of the sensor, there's the lens that you're going to put on it. Obviously the lens plays a large role too. There's the compression. There's so many factors, and the lighting, you know, like if you take $100,000 ARRI camera and you bring it into a terrible lighting situation, the iPhone's going to look better. The iPhone that's lit better is going to look better than that expensive ARRI camera if the lighting is good, you know? So you bring an ARRI into a scene where the lighting is terrible, your final result is going to be terrible. You bring an iPhone into a scenario where the lighting is great, it's going to be great results.
Right.
So there's so many factors involved.
You know, speaking of your setup, since we're talking about all this stuff, you want to just walk us through what you've got going on there in your streaming studio?
Sure. So I don't have anything fancy. Well, the camera I'm using is the original Canon C300. It's not 4K. It's a 1920 by 1080 camera. I'm running at 60 frames per second right now. I've got the thing. See, again, this is the important part about this camera, is that I've got a Zeiss Distagon lens on it, and I'm shooting at f2. So it's a very wide open aperture. My room's actually quite small, but I'm getting the separation between me and the background because I'm shooting at f2, which is a very wide open aperture.
Hella bokeh.
Yeah, you get shallower depth of field, and the glass, that Zeiss glass, is just beautiful. But the most important thing, you know, is the lighting. So whenever I light something, you always start with the key light, and the key light could either be in front of you, it could be on the side of you, it could be behind you. In my case, it's kind of like a 3/4 key. So I just have this small, it's a 9-inch LED light. It's a very inexpensive light I got on Amazon. I have it being like my key light essentially. And then once I have the key light, the fill lights kind of determine the contrast of the scene. So I've got another light bounced into a wall to kind of fill in the general ambience, and then another one in my window, which will keep the light from the window consistent because the sun moves throughout the day.
Mhm.
But I have like the hard sunlight blocked off, but the window still glows a little bit, and I have a light tube inside the window, so even after the sun goes down, the window is still glowing at the same
Oh, you're still
intensity.
getting that same consistency. So no
Yeah,
matter when you
exactly.
stream, what point of the day, that's a great idea.
Yeah, yeah. And then then I just have this light here, which is like it's a red LED light it's got a mogul base, and I just put it into a lamp, house lamp. So yeah, it's a pretty simple setup. It's 1, 2, 3, it's 4 lights all together.
Mhm.
I could turn off the light in the window at this point because it's dark out right now, and you wouldn't really notice much of a difference. It's just subtle. It's like the reason why I have that light is because sometimes I do things on my desk,
Mhm.
and that light is mostly like hitting the desk area. So if I have like a new game or something that I'm
Right.
gonna open up, it's giving me that light.
How about your audio system?
The audio is I have a really nice microphone. I have a Sennheiser MKH50 microphone. It's industry standard for like shooting interviews inside. It's a great microphone for interiors. Sennheiser's got another one called the 416, which is a shotgun microphone. It's very good too, but it's more designed to be like on a boom pole and outside.
Mhm.
But I'm using this. This is like a hypercourrier microphone. This MKH50. It's I mean, it's just an awesome mic. It sounds great, and I'm feeding it into this 8-channel mixer. So when I've got my microphone going into one channel, and then I've got spots for 2 other microphones because sometimes I have guests, and then I've got a mixer for sometimes I'll hook my laptop up to it. So like if I'm gonna interview someone, I'll connect to them with my laptop, and I'll take the output of the laptop and put it into the mixer. And then I've got I got a spot for my Amiga. The Amiga's got RC outputs on the back of it, and I take the RC outputs of the Amiga and I put them into the mixer, so I can mix. I like mixing everything. I still like sliders. I
Right.
like knobs and
Yeah.
sliders.
Yeah. What's the
It's
what's
easy.
the brand on that mixer?
It's a Mackie Pro FX8.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and it's cool because it's got USB output on it, so I can just take all these analog XLR inputs. Not of them all XLR, but it's got analog XLR inputs.
Mhm.
It's got RCA inputs. It's got phono inputs, and the output is USB. So then I can just feed it into my
Right
computer.
into the computer. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, before we go, I've got one more question for you about Arcade Dreams. So how much content is there going to be? How many episodes are going to be part of this thing?
Well, at the base Kickstarter level, there's going to be 3 1-hour episodes, and then the sky's the limit depending on how well the Kickstarter goes. The more that the Kickstarter can raise, that will afford us to do more additional episodes. But the base is 3 1-hour episodes, so you'll get at the very minimum you get 3 hours of content.
Okay, I think that's very reasonable. You're asking $29 for the digital version, which works out at about $10 per episode. I think that is highly worth it for the quality and also for the sort of the never before seen quality of these episodes, especially with these older games. So, Bill, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your new project, for talking about cameras. It's always a good time talking to you.
It's always a pleasure to be on your show. You guys are awesome. I love all the hard work that you're doing for Amiga community, and I appreciate you guys very, very much. You're awesome guys, and keep up the great work on your end.